Discover timeless principles for success, growth, and change. Let these powerful words from Dr. Myles Munroe guide you into purpose, vision, and transformation. This is more than a message, it's a journey for your life.
When doors close, prayers seem unanswered, and everything within you questions, did God forget me? But what if I told you the silence was the syllabus and the suffering was the certification? Purpose never pauses, even in testing. That statement carries more than just encouragement. It carries prophetic insight into how God shapes His chosen ones. Often when we find ourselves in seasons of waiting, confusion, or silence, we begin to question whether we've missed God, whether we've fallen out of favor, or whether we've done something wrong. But in the kingdom, process is not punishment. Silence is not neglect. Delay is not denial. Every test we endure, every wilderness we walk through, every prayer that seems to go unanswered, is working together to fulfill something that existed long before the test began: your divine purpose. You must understand that before God releases you into your assignment, He ensures that your character is strong enough to carry your calling. Purpose is eternal, but preparation is essential. The enemy wants you to believe that silence equals separation from God, but in the kingdom, silence is often the training ground of champions. You weren't forgotten, you were being formed. Just because the heavens didn't respond immediately doesn't mean heaven wasn't watching. God often hides those He has marked. He isolates to impart, and He tests to prepare. That delay you thought was wasted time was actually sacred time. Time where God was equipping you for something greater than what your current environment could reveal. You were never being punished, you were being positioned. Positioned for impact, positioned for influence, positioned for a season where your voice, your gifts, and your anointing would not just be seen, but respected. What you walked through was not to kill your confidence, it was to kill your pride. It was to strip away everything that could not go with you into the next season. God will never allow what is holy to be handled with immaturity. So He tests and He watches, not because He doesn't trust you, but because He is preparing to entrust you. This is why some doors didn't open when you knocked. This is why people walked away when you prayed for them to stay. This is why some prayers were answered with silence, and why some seasons felt like survival mode instead of overflow. God wasn't ignoring you, He was insulating you. There were lessons in the silence, messages in the pain, and wisdom in the waiting. And though your emotions were loud, God was steady, watching, teaching, molding. The potter doesn't panic when the clay resists. He just continues shaping it until it's ready to hold what He's about to pour. You see, purpose doesn't bend to emotions. It doesn't respond to external timelines or societal pressure. Purpose flows from eternity into time, and God, in His sovereignty, schedules your manifestation at the moment of your maturity. That's why you couldn't force your way into rooms before. That's why trying to make it happen in your own strength always left you drained, because what's born of the flesh will never sustain what's designed by the Spirit. And here's the divine truth. The testing season was never in competition with your destiny. It was in covenant with it. Every hardship, every betrayal, every tear, and every unanswered question was part of heaven's curriculum for your calling. You thought you were losing time, but heaven was keeping perfect record. You thought you were behind, but God was building you in a way that when the door opens, you will not only walk through it, you'll own it. The pressure wasn't punishment, it was proof. Proof that you were chosen, proof that you could be trusted, proof that there was something on your life worth testing in the first place. When a student is tested, the teacher doesn't talk. That doesn't mean the teacher isn't in the room. Likewise, God never left your side. His silence was strategy. His quietness was confirmation that you already had what you needed: faith, character, wisdom, and endurance. The test was designed to show you what was inside of you all along, that you were stronger than the storm, deeper than the pain, and called to something greater than the temporary trial. Purpose never paused, not for one moment. While you wept, purpose stood still and waited. While you wondered if you were disqualified, purpose stood secure, untouched by the circumstances around you. Because purpose isn't fragile. It's rooted in God's original intent, and God never changes his mind. He's the master strategist, the divine orchestrator, who doesn't waste a single second. Every test, every detour, every delay was written into your purpose from the beginning. There is a sacred process that heaven honors. Before God reveals you, he will first refine you. And that refining almost always happens in isolation. Not because you are forgotten, not because you are abandoned, but because God is intentional with those he chooses. If you are truly called, you will be concealed. If you are truly marked, you will be misunderstood. And if you are truly chosen, you will be separated. Why? Because identity is never discovered in crowds. It is clarified in caves, in prisons, in quiet rooms where no one is clapping and no one is calling your name. Isolation is not a sign of rejection, it's a mark of distinction. Think of David, anointed to be king but sent back to the sheepfold. No palace, no crown, no public recognition. Just a boy with a harp, a slingshot, and an invisible assignment. But in that place of isolation, David's identity was forged, not by people, but by God. He learned who he was not because someone told him, but because he walked with God when no one else was watching. Joseph too was isolated, not once, but many times. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit. Everything about his circumstances shouted forgotten. But in that prison cell, his character was being strengthened, his discernment sharpened, and his identity solidified. When he finally stood before Pharaoh, Joseph didn't speak like a man who just got out of jail. He spoke like a man who had spent time with destiny. Esther was hidden too. A Jewish orphan girl living in a foreign land, tucked away in the palace, her beauty noticed by men but her true identity known only by God. It wasn't until the appointed moment that she stepped forward, not just as a queen, but as a deliverer. And that identity wasn't given to her in public. It was discovered in private prayer, fasting, and obedience, when everything was on the line. God hides his greatest weapons, not to frustrate them, but to form them. Because the applause of men can't sustain what only heaven can birth. If you need validation to walk in your purpose, then you're still in training. If your identity wavers when the likes stop and the invitations dry up, then God will keep you in hiding until you no longer depend on people for permission. You were never meant to be defined by attention. You were meant to be discovered in alignment. God wants you to know who you are without the mic, without the stage, without the affirmation. He wants you to be so rooted in him that even when no one sees your worth, you still walk like royalty. Because identity isn't about visibility, it's about authenticity. And authenticity is forged in isolation. This is why the isolation didn't kill you. It awakened you. It exposed what was false and revealed what was eternal. It stripped away performance, comparison, insecurity, and pride. It left you raw but real. And in that rawness, God whispered truth to your spirit. that you are chosen, that you are loved, that you are called for something far greater than what applause can affirm. The truth is, applause is seasonal, but identity is eternal. God couldn't afford for you to confuse the two. He had to teach you how to stand when no one's watching, how to believe when no one is clapping, how to remain faithful when no one is affirming, because that's what leaders do. That's what kings and queens in the kingdom must carry, a knowing that goes deeper than attention. The test was never about who liked you. It was about whether you knew who you were when no one was looking. It was about whether your faith could survive in the shadows, whether your voice would still praise when the room was empty, and whether your heart still burned when your name wasn't called. That's the kind of person God reveals at the right time. Those whose identity has been proven in isolation. God never promotes randomly. In the kingdom, there are no shortcuts to elevation, only obedience through process. Promotion is not just about favor, it's about faithfulness. God does not place crowns on untested heads. Before there is glory, there must be grit. Before there is the palace, there must be the proving ground. Heaven's promotions are not based on talent, popularity, or potential alone. They are based on the completion of a process that was designed to mature your character, shape your spirit, and align your heart with God's agenda. The test you went through wasn't just a difficult season. It was a divine examination. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Every pain, every delay, every unanswered prayer wasn't just something you survived. It was a test you passed, and your obedience was being recorded in heaven. While others were chasing platforms, you were learning how to steward pain. While some looked for shortcuts, you stayed faithful in silence. That silence was not wasted. It was measured. And God was watching not only what you did, but how you did it. He was looking at your posture, your patience, your integrity, your willingness to still praise Him even when it didn't make sense. You didn't just go through that test, you grew through it. The test wasn't just about whether you could endure pressure, it was about whether you could remain pure under pressure. Could you still forgive when betrayed? Could you still give when it cost you everything? Could you remain consistent when nobody clapped? These were not minor details, they were major checkpoints. In the kingdom, your attitude and obscurity often determines your altitude and influence. And now, because you passed the test, heaven has authorized your next season. Not because you forced it, not because you demanded it, but because you submitted to the process. God only promotes what's been proven. And your testing season has revealed what no resume ever could, that you are trusted. Think about it. Before Joseph was promoted to second in command in Egypt, he was tested through betrayal, slavery, and false accusation. Yet through every stage, he remained faithful. His test wasn't a detour, it was a divine setup. Each moment of suffering was qualifying him for the throne. Heaven wasn't punishing Joseph, it was positioning him. The same pattern follows throughout Scripture. Before David wore the crown, he endured spears from Saul, nights in caves, and accusations from men. But he never lost his posture of worship. That was the test. Before Esther stood in royal authority, she first had to risk everything in fasting and prayer. Her elevation came after her submission to divine purpose. God waits to see what you do with obedience before He releases overflow. That's how promotion works in the kingdom. What you're walking into next is not coincidence. It's not random favor falling from the sky. It's the outcome of spiritual alignment and tested character. You didn't just pass a season, you passed heaven's standards. That promotion you're stepping into is a reward, not a surprise. It's the fulfillment of a principle God never violates. To whom much is given, much is required. You've fulfilled the requirement. Now comes the release. This is why you couldn't skip steps. This is why rushing didn't work. God wasn't just preparing the blessing for you. He was preparing you for the blessing. And now, because you submitted to the fire, because you surrendered your will, because you walked through the storm without losing your worship, heaven has made its decision. It's your time. Your next season is not a chance. It's a confirmation. A declaration from God that you are ready, not just to be seen, but to serve, not just to rise, but to reign, not just to carry the weight, but to steward it with wisdom. Heaven promotes only after earth's tests are passed, and you have passed. One of the most powerful revelations a chosen one must embrace is this: God's delays are never God's denials. In the kingdom, time is not just ticking, it's timing. And while you may have felt like you were behind, overlooked, or bypassed, heaven was orchestrating something far greater than you could see. If it didn't happen when you expected, it wasn't because you failed. It's because the environment wasn't ready, the people weren't prepared, or your next assignment needed a stage that hadn't yet been built. Delay in God's hands is strategic. It's design, not disapproval. God is never late, and He's certainly never early. He moves in fullness, not in fragments. When God releases something, it's not just to bless you, it's to position you for impact. So if it felt like the door stayed shut longer than it should have, it's because that door wasn't connected to your destiny, it was connected to your development. Sometimes God allows a delay to refine what's in you before He releases what's for you. Delay stretches faith, it purifies motives, it tests obedience, it separates the immature from the prepared. It forces you to depend on God when nothing else makes sense. And when you come through it, you no longer seek opportunities just for validation, you seek them for assignment. You don't just want the blessing anymore. You want to become the blessing. That shift happens in delay. And that's why the delay was necessary. Look at Moses, 40 years in the wilderness before stepping into leadership. Look at Jesus, 30 years in obscurity before 3 years of public ministry. Look at Sarah, waiting decades for the promised son. Delay is not a flaw in the process, it is the process. Heaven's design does not follow earth's deadlines. Your calendar might scream late, but heaven's clock says right on schedule. The truth is, if God had given you what you asked for back then, it would have crushed you. The level of spiritual maturity, emotional strength, and clarity you now carry didn't exist in the previous season. The delay was not to keep you stuck, it was to make you ready. You're not stepping into an old opportunity at a better time. You're stepping into a new assignment with fresh authority. This isn't just another chapter in your story, it's a brand new volume in your purpose. Everything you lost, everything that didn't work, everything that seemed like a missed moment, heaven never wasted any of it. What looked like silence was actually strategy. While you were waiting, God was working. While you were wondering if He forgot you, He was preparing something that eyes haven't seen and ears haven't heard. Delay is where God clears the stage, resets the lights, aligns the right people, removes the wrong ones, and then brings you forward, not to fill space, but to fulfill purpose. And here's the deeper truth. What you thought was a no was actually a not yet. It wasn't rejection, it was realignment. God had to make sure that you were becoming what He intended before He allowed the manifestation to arrive. And now because you endured, because you trusted through the wait, and because you didn't bow to fear, you're not just entering a new season, you're stepping into a mandated mission from heaven. You've graduated from waiting rooms to war rooms, from hoping for the door to open to realizing you are the key. You're not the same person who entered that delay. And because you endured the refining, heaven is releasing the revealing. This new season is not recycled favor. It's recalibrated purpose. You're not walking into what you missed. You're walking into what was always meant for now. In the kingdom, mantles are not given casually. They are not inherited through emotion, talent, or ambition. Mantles are received by those who have been tested by fire and found faithful. You can't wish your way into divine authority. You must be proven. Heaven does not entrust its weight to those who have not been willing to carry the burden in private before being honored in public. Glory is heavy, and only those who have been broken, refined, and reshaped by God can carry it without collapsing under it. Desire alone is not the qualifier. Many desire platforms, influence, and spiritual authority, but desire without process leads to disaster. God in His mercy will withhold what you are not yet ready to carry, not because He is denying you, but because He is protecting both you and what He intends to do through you. You see, when God places a mantle on someone, it's not to make them famous. It's to make them useful. It's not for spotlight, it's for service. And only those who have endured the furnace of affliction can walk with the wisdom and humility that true authority demands. If you've endured the warfare, the wilderness, and the weeping, then you've passed a test most people run from. The warfare tested your stamina, the wilderness tested your trust, and the weeping tested your posture. Could you still worship when there were no results, no applause, no clarity? Could you still say yes to God when all you had left was tears? That's what proves whether you're ready. Not your resume, not your knowledge, not your gifting, but your endurance through seasons that were designed to crush everything in you that couldn't go with you into the next season. Think about Elijah. Before he passed his mantle to Elisha, Elisha had to follow him through Gilgal, Bethel, Jericho, and the Jordan. Each location represented a process of sacrifice, surrender, and stripping. And only after Elijah remained faithful through all of it did Elijah release the double portion. The mantle was not given because Elisha asked. It was given because he followed, served, and stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. The same is true for you. If you are still standing after all you've walked through, it's not just survival. It's confirmation. You have been tested. The pressure you endured was proof that there was something on your life worth crushing. The enemy wouldn't have fought you so hard if there wasn't a mantle worth stealing. Hell does not attack the ordinary. The level of warfare you faced was evidence of the weight of what you're about to carry. And here's what you need to understand. Testing is heaven's trust check. God doesn't test you to punish you. He tests you to prove you. He allows the breaking to produce purity, the stretching to release capacity, and the delays to birth endurance. That mantle you desire, it must rest on shoulders that have been trained to carry it, not just in power, but in integrity. There's a cost to the calling, and only those who have paid the hidden price will be entrusted with the public power. So if you've walked through nights that made no sense, if you've carried assignments that felt beyond your strength, if you stayed faithful when quitting looked easier, know this, heaven saw it. Your name may not have been in lights, but your obedience echoed in eternity. And that obedience is the very reason God is now trusting you with more. The next level is not just about elevation, it's about entrustment. You're not being rewarded for surviving. You're being released because you're being proven. What's coming next is not just breakthrough, it's mantle. Not just favor, it's function. And it's coming because you endured the test and passed heaven's criteria. There's a difference between a comeback and a commission. A comeback implies you returning to something that once was. A recovery, a rebound, a restoration of what was lost. But what God is doing in this season of your life is far greater than a return. You're not being sent back, you're being sent forth. You're not reviving a broken dream, you're stepping into a divine assignment that was written before time began. This is not about picking up where you left off. This is about finally beginning what you were born for. Many people saw your silence and assumed you were finished. They looked at your wilderness season and thought you were out of the race. They saw the loss, the delay, the heartbreak, and assumed it was over for you. But they didn't realize that heaven had you in incubation, not in activity. You weren't just resting, you were being refined. You weren't just healing, you were being honed. You weren't missing, you were maturing into the kind of person who could now be trusted with this next move of God. You are not starting over, you are starting on time. According to heaven's calendar, according to divine timing, according to the prophetic blueprint that was spoken over your life when you were still in your mother's womb. That detour, that delay, that dark season that looked like failure, it was all preparation for your launch. The fire you walked through didn't disqualify you, it qualified you. The silence you endured wasn't abandonment, it was alignment. The pruning wasn't rejection, it was the proof that you're bearing fruit. Heaven can now multiply. When God commissions someone, He doesn't just call them, He sends them. And what you're stepping into now carries divine backing. This is not hype. This is not emotional momentum. This is a kingdom assignment that comes with authority, clarity, and weight. You're not just moving forward, you're being deployed. You're not just doing something new, you're fulfilling something ancient. You are stepping into a moment that was prepared for you and you were prepared for it. This is your Esther moment, your David moment, your Moses moment. But it's not their story, it's yours. All the prophetic words, the late night prayers, the inner wrestling, the long seasons of hiddenness, they were leading to this. You've been commissioned not because you're perfect, but because you're ready. Ready to carry glory without seeking attention. Ready to build what outlasts you. Ready to lead not with ego, but with assignment in your eyes and surrender in your spirit. And the beauty of God's commission is this. He doesn't just send you, He goes with you. You won't walk into this next season alone. You won't have to strive or prove or compete. The same God who kept you in the fire is the God who now breathes on your future. What you're carrying now isn't a recycled dream. It's a released mandate. You are not rising to return. You are rising to reign. So no, this is not a comeback. This is your commissioning. A divine yes, stamped by heaven. The confirmation that your process was not in vain. The announcement that your time is not past. You are not who you were in your last season. And you will not live by who they said you were. You've emerged from the test not as a survivor, but as a sent one. And when heaven sends you, no man, no demon, no circumstance can cancel the call. To now, let the earth hear what heaven has already declared. The test is over. The silence has served its purpose. The fire has refined you. The wilderness has trained you. And now the gates of your next season are open. Not by man's decision, but by God's decree. You are not stepping forward timidly. You are stepping in boldly, clothed in authority, marked by obedience, and carrying the weight of glory that was born in secret This is not just a shift. This is not just a moment. This is a commissioning, a kingdom assignment, a divine release. Heaven is not waiting for you to catch up. Heaven is waiting for you to show up. So arise, chosen one, not because you've earned it, but because you've been prepared for it. Not because the world approves, but because heaven has authorized. The test is over. Your next season begins now.
We appreciate you joining us today. May the wisdom you've heard shape your vision, strengthen your faith, and lead you toward lasting success.